Hello, and welcome to another teaching from 2536. Today we're going to explore what it means to fulfill the Father's instruction to remove the leaven from our homes by keeping the festival, not with the old bread leavened with malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So let's begin our study by looking at the Father's instruction found in Exodus chapter 12. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, but on the first day you shall remove dough with leaven from your houses. For whomever eats anything with leaven from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. The removal of leaven has become a family tradition, where the wife and children remove the leaven, while leaving a single morsel for the head of the house to find during a final inspection. Once all the leaven has been removed, the family is able to stand proudly in their righteousness, having heard and obeyed the Father's instruction, and walking in the newness of life. But are we? Are we really walking in the newness of life just because we threw out a couple boxes of cereal and a loaf of bread? Or could this instruction be pointing us to a weightier matter? Let's look at something Christ said to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You pay tithe of mint, dill, and cumin, but have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done, without leaving the others undone. Christ says, yes, you walk in the written code, but you do it through the circumcision of your flesh, and not from an overflow of your heart. This is why you neglect the weightier matters that the law is pointing to, and why Paul says the law is simply a tutor or a guardian. Therefore, the law has become a tutor to lead us to Christ, so that we may be justified by faith. Paul builds on this understanding in his letter to the Galatians, when he writes to them how the law is only a shadow or an outline of righteousness, not the reality. These are a shadow of things to come, but the body that casts it belongs to Christ. In other words, those who are in Christ cast the shadow of Christ, which is the law. A shadow is simply an outline or silhouette of the reality, so those who follow the doctrines of men will eventually conform into the image of man. Thus they cast the shadow in the same image. For example, the Pharisees followed the law as their way of righteousness, and each year they would remove the leaven from their homes. Having heard and obeyed the law, they believed themselves to be righteous, which produced the bad fruit of pride, self-righteousness, and judgment. Thus they cast a shadow of pride, self-righteousness, and judgment over all those who didn't follow the law in the same way that they did. But those who are in Christ will cast a shadow in the image of Christ, because he's the substance that reveals the weightier matters of the law, which is to love the Father and others. It's in this way the law acts as a tutor that leads us to Christ, where we sift the Father's instructions through his heart and spirit, which is a heart and spirit of love, where the weightier matters of the law are revealed. Christ shared an example of this understanding during his Sermon on the Mount when he said, "You have heard that it was said, 'Thou shalt not commit adultery,' but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So to use the liberty we have in Christ properly, we must first and foremost die to ourselves, so that Christ is able to fulfill the Father's instruction in our heart. So when we sift the Father's instruction to remove the leaven through the heart of Christ, it reveals the spirit of the law, which is to remove all of the traditions and false doctrines that have found their way into our worship. It's in this way the righteousness of Christ is imputed to us in order to fulfill the instruction in our heart, which allows us then to walk in the newness of life. This is why Christ warned his disciples, and Jesus said to them, "Watch out and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." The Father calls on us to revisit this each year, because as we mature we view things from a different perspective, which allows us to see things in a different way. For me, this year has come with a greater sense of urgency. Now, I'm no alarmist, but there's no doubt we're nearing the end of the age and the return of Christ. So let's take a look at a prophecy of Daniel, who gives us a very interesting vision of a message he received from the archangel Michael. At that time Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time your people, everyone whose name is written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Now I believe this to be the fulfillment of the Feast of Trumpets. Then Daniel continues by writing, "Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." Now this is where we must allow Scripture to define Scripture. It says those who are wise will shine, and the understanding of who is wise is given to us by Christ himself in the parable of the wise and foolish builders. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rains came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because its foundation was on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice, it's like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rains came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Now imagine you're hiking and looking for a place to rest when you come across a large rock. Now if you've ever laid down on a rock, you'll notice that the shape of the rock doesn't change. So if we want to be comfortable on the rock, we have to conform to it, because it's not going to conform to us. That rock is Christ, the Word of the Father, and those who read it will find little rest at first, because the Word doesn't conform to our sinful nature. And this is where the doctrines of men come in. The doctrines of men are like a sandy beach, and if you've ever laid down on a sandy beach, you'll notice at first it might not be all that comfortable. But if we move it around a little, we can mold the sand to conform perfectly to our shape. In other words, with a little twisting, we can get the Word to accommodate our sinful nature. And this is why Christ warned us to beware. There are many who are foolish and are building their faith on the doctrines and traditions of religious doctrine. But Daniel tells us there's going to be a time just before the end of days when the wise, those who have built their faith on the Word, will shine like the brightness of heaven so they can lead many to righteousness. Then we read, "But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge." Now Daniel's not talking about an increase in general knowledge. And we all know that with the advent of the internet, general knowledge has increased at an exponential rate. No, Daniel's referring to a particular type of knowledge, and that's the knowledge of righteousness. Daniel goes on to write, "Then I, Daniel, looked, and there before me stood two others, one on this bank of the river, and one on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, 'How long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled?'" Now if you're wondering who the man clothed in linen is, that's Christ, who's hovering above the river, which is the river of life. Then Daniel writes, "The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven. And I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, 'It will be for a time, times, and half a time. When the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed.'" So the understanding here is that the beast system is going to be allowed to have power over all of the religious leaders of the world. This will be the only time in all of the ages when this is going to occur. But this is going to happen so that the hold the religious systems have over all of the people will be broken, and all things will be completed. Daniel tells us of two people on either side of the river, with Christ hovering above the river of life. Now something major is about to happen, and I believe Ezekiel is going to tell us what it is. In Ezekiel 37, he writes about two sticks, representing the two houses of Israel coming together as one. In other words, everything that was lost in the way of righteousness by both Judaism and Christianity will be made known to them. Then we read, "He replied, 'Go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end.'" Now this is interesting, because all of this is going to be sealed up, which also means there's going to be a time when all of this is going to unfold as well. And the time when that's going to happen is just before the end of the age. This will be a time when many will seek to purify themselves and make their garments white. This is Hebraic cultural wedding language, telling us that with the cleansing of her garment, the bride is preparing herself for her wedding. In other words, she's a wise virgin, one who's beginning to learn and understand the ways of righteousness. But the wicked, well, the wicked will continue to act wickedly. Now we don't often think of believers as being wicked, nor do we think of their behavior as being wicked either. But that's exactly what's being said here, that there will be many believers at this time, on both sides of the river, that are going to behave and act wickedly. But the difference is, none of the wicked will understand that they're being wicked. In other words, there are going to be those who are going to continue in wickedness. And if you're going to stay where you are, if you're not going to remove the leaven from your house, you're not going to be able to understand. But those who are wise, they will understand. because they have eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to receive. Praise the Father. As people are waking up and we're witnessing the two sticks coming together, as many are beginning to understand and teach the ways of righteousness. But they must be waking up on the wrong side of the bed, because all I'm seeing are people yelling and screaming at each other, "I'm right, you're wrong," and it's coming from both sides of the river. But I believe Scripture is warning us that both sides are infected, and the solution isn't for one to become like the other. The Father's call for us is clear. We're to come out of her, not fix her, or not even to destroy her, which is why Christ tells us, "Do not pull up the tares with the wheat." Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the tares also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the tares come from?" "The enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you're pulling the tares, you might uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the tares and tie them into bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." This is why we're told to come out of her, because of her leaven. Because a little leaven will eventually work its way through the entire doctrine. Let's turn to Proverbs 7. I'd like to share this proverb with you because I believe it really highlights the journey those who seek the Father are on, along with the warning that comes with it. "My son, keep my words and treasure my commandments within you. Keep my commandments and live, and my teachings as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablets of your heart. Say to wisdom, 'You are my sister,' and call understanding your intimate friend, so that they may keep you from the adulteress, from the foreigner who flatters with her words." Here we have the story of a bridegroom who's seeking a bride. But there's this adulterous woman who's constantly trying to seduce his bride away from him with her words. We're told she's a foreigner, which means this is something that's going on outside the camp. At the window of my house, I looked down through the lattice. Think of looking outside the camp. I saw among the simple, I noticed among the young men, this would be those who have just begun their spiritual journey, a young man who had no sense. In other words, he's unlearned, those who have not yet had an understanding of righteousness. Passing through the street near her corner, and he walks along the way of her house, in the twilight, in the evening, in the middle of the night, in the darkness. And behold, a woman comes to meet him, dressed as a prostitute and cunning of heart. She is boisterous and rebellious. Her feet do not remain at home. She is now in the streets, now in the public squares, and lurking by every corner. So we have this seductress, and she's going to be on every street corner, seeking out those of the diaspora of Israel. Now what's interesting is how we can find a church on just about every street corner of the world. So this is a very interesting prophecy being told here. So she seizes him and kisses him, and with a brazen face she says to him, "I was due to offer peace offerings. Today I have paid my vows. Therefore I have come out to meet you, to seek your presence diligently, and I have found you." In other words, we have a vow, a promise, that she's coming for you, and she's coming for you in earnest. "I have spread my bed with coverings, with colored linens from Egypt." Now the adulterous woman calls on the people to remember their time in Egypt. And what was the cry of those having been redeemed out of Egypt after only a short time in the wilderness? They longed for what they had back in Egypt. So what we have here is someone who is relatively new in their faith being lured back into the world. Then we read, "I have sprinkled my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let's drink our fill of love until morning. Let's delight ourselves with caresses, for my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey." So the bridegroom is away and has gone on a long journey. That bridegroom is Christ, who went to prepare a place for us. He has taken a bag of money with him. At the full moon he will come home. Could this be alluding to an appointed time in the fall, specifically Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which always happens during a full moon? With her many persuasions she entices him. With her flattering lips she seduces him. Suddenly he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as one who walks in ankle bracelets to the discipline of a fool, until an arrow pierces through his liver, as a bird hurries to the snare, so he does not know that it will cost him his life. Now it's interesting that it mentions the liver, because the liver is the cleansing system that rids the body of toxins. Now therefore, my sons, listen to me and pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For many are the victims she has brought to ruin, and numerous are all those slaughtered by her. Her house is the way of Sheol, descending to the chambers of death. Now I believe Proverbs 7 is describing the actual actions of Mystery Babylon and what Israel had to stand against while they were in exile, which is a constant seduction by the whore of Babylon, whose influence can be seen in every one of the world's major religions. So what we're seeing right now in all the world religious systems are various expressions of Mystery Babylon. Now when looking at the Passover or the Feast of Unleavened Bread, an expression of Mystery Babylon can only be witnessed in Christianity and Judaism because they're the only ones that hold to the Father's set-apart times as presented to us in Scripture. None of the other world religions honor Passover or unleavened bread. What we're starting to see are many looking at these feasts and their meanings. But when they look at our brother Judah, many times what they see are only a lot of traditions, like the Passover Seder. And of course our brothers in Christianity hold to their own set of traditions, also known as Easter, which reveals just how alive the whore of Babylon remains today. So what's wrong with a little tradition? Often we'll hear someone say, "The Father knows my heart." But what they fail to understand is that the heart is desperately wicked, and that's the problem. We have a heart problem. Because of a lack of knowledge, that statement is like putting nails in a doctrinal coffin. You see, it doesn't matter what it means to you or me. It only matters what it means to the Father. And these are the types of statements that come out of a corrupt heart, and why Christ said, "What goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth, that is what defiles them." But this is what we often have to contend with, on both sides of the river, that the Father knows my heart. So if you've aligned yourself with brother Judah, then you'll often see the set-apart times as something you do at certain times of the year in a practice of tradition. If you've aligned yourself with Christianity, then you see the set-apart times as little more than a good excuse to get together with family and friends. But if you look closely, what you'll see is how they're all based around something we're warned about in Scripture. They're all based around the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and a boastful pride of life, which are the fiery darts of the adversary. Each of the Father's set-apart times have been converted into Babylonian traditions and practices, and they're all based on the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and a boastful pride of life. Just look at the big two, Easter and Christmas. These holidays are ingrained in us at the earliest stages of life. They're used by the enemy to teach our children another way, by entertaining them with lights, colors, candy, gifts, all of which are designed to pull them from the way of the Lord. But what do the Scriptures tell us we should be teaching our children? "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk to them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up." We're called to raise our children according to the commandments of the Father. So before we instill something else in our children, something that's all about them and not about the Father, keep this in mind. It's not about you, it's about Him. And here's the irony. If we're holding to the Father's instructions and His set-apart times, things like Easter and Christmas would never have become part of our worship, which is why these words from Paul should strike fear into the hearts of those who hold to these traditions. For this reason, God sends them a powerful delusion, so that they will believe the lie, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth, but have delighted in wickedness. Paul writes that the Father will send them a delusion so strong that they really will believe what's false. In other words, when they gaze upon the empty cross and tomb, what they'll see are colored eggs and bunny rabbits. This is where we see that the context of Paul's warning is in relationship to our spiritual journey, and it's not about being deceived by the beast system. Now, as horrible as the beast system is, I believe this is referring to a much weightier matter, because it's actually telling us that those who will be condemned did not believe the truth, but found pleasure in unrighteousness. Confirmation of this can be found in the book of Daniel, who prophesied that we're going to start getting an increase of knowledge. But remember, this isn't just any knowledge. This is an increase in the knowledge of righteousness. So the delusion Daniel is referring to are those who did not want to know the truth because they had no desire for righteousness. Now let's look at what else Daniel wrote about this. He, referring to the Antichrist, will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set-apart times and laws. The holy people will be delivered unto his hands for a time, times, and half a time. In other words, the Father is going to allow the enemy to do this in order to test us. So it's no wonder how all these things like Christmas, Easter, Halloween have become tradition within Christianity. It's all part of this prophecy of Daniel coming to pass. But here's the thing. If leading up to Christ's return, the enemy is focused on the Father's set-apart times, don't you think it'd be a good idea that we'd be focused on them too? Now, I don't mean just going through the motions and checking boxes, but really wrestling with what's in our heart about them, especially considering most of Christianity has completely ignored the Father's set-apart times, while our brother Judah has turned them all into little more than box-checking exercises. The change in the Father's appointed times have become a form of idolatry. If you don't believe me, just mention taking away Christmas from a traditional Christian, and they'll act as if you're trying to take away Christ himself. They do this because they don't realize they've traded the truth for a lie and are actually defending the enemy. This is where we see the true cunning of the enemy, who has convinced many to mix his bad seed in with the Father's good seed. But remember, the Father has put enmity between his seed and the enemy's seed. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and he shall bruise you on the head, and you will bruise him on the heel. This is why we're instructed not to sow two kinds of seed in our field. You are to keep my statutes. You shall not crossbreed two kinds of your cattle. You shall not sow your field with two kinds of seed, nor wear a garment of two kinds of material mixed together. Now many will dismiss this instruction because they believe it's only for farmers. But remember, the Father often uses the physical to represent the spiritual. So spiritually speaking, our field is our heart, and the Father is instructing us not to sow his good seed, the Word, which is Christ, into our heart, along with the bad seed of the enemy, who is the father of lies. So how can we avoid allowing the enemy to deceive us into mixing bad seed into our worship? Nature abhors a vacuum. So when we use our own strength and understanding to push out a lie, it leaves a void in our heart which nature quickly fills with the things of this world, which is just another lie. It's like trading smoking for overeating, or overeating for compulsive shopping. But the things of this world, including falsehoods, are like Chinese food. They're only able to fill the void we have for a short time. This is why so many who are seeking truth go from church to church or denomination to denomination. They just can't find the joy, peace, or contentment they seek. So they shoot the messenger when the issue is really the message. And the message of today's mainstream doctrines, in both Judaism and Christianity, is for us to trade one lie for another. The only way for the truth to set us free is for us to push out all of the lies with the truth, which is Christ, leaving no room for anything else, including worthless traditions and half-truths. This is why Christ said, Jesus replied, "And why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition?" So please don't miss this. Christ said this to believers nearly 2,000 years ago, people who knew and understood the law infinitely better than any of us do today. And now here we are some 2,000 years later, and can any of you say you're honoring the Father's set-apart times more faithfully than they were? I've been observing the Father's Sabbath for over 10 years, and what I've found is that any time I take my focus off the Father, even if it's just for a moment, I fall into the enemy's trap. This is why, even with all the knowledge and understanding I have, not once have I been able to keep the Sabbath holy. Every week something has been able to distract me and take my focus off the Father. It might be a task that I wasn't able to complete before Shabbat, or maybe one that I see that needs doing after. But it's always something, and I believe this is what inspired John to write, "If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us." What I believe John is so eloquently writing here is this. If we believe that we're keeping the law, then the truth is not in us. We simply lack any understanding of the law. In other words, sure, we might not be having an affair and boast in keeping the Torah, but we fail to see all of the lust that we have in our heart. But remember, it's not our flesh that's going to be judged, it's our heart. This is why traditions are so deadly to our faith. They give us a false sense of righteousness. that we're keeping the law and building faith in the Word. But the reality is, we're simply building faith in our own faithfulness to observe our traditions. This is why Christ said, "Thus you nullify the Word of God by your tradition that you have handed down." And you do many things like that. This is the same message Paul had for the Galatians. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you and kept you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. The believers in Galatia were starting to get it. They were starting to come out of her, but then something happened. Someone started to hinder them from walking in the newness of life in Christ. The Galatians didn't hold on to wisdom. Instead, they listened to the adulterous woman who added leaven into their worship. Now, if there's one thing mankind can do, it's justify sin. We'll deceive ourselves by saying, "I know Easter is of pagan origin, but I have Christ at the center of my observance." And that might be true, so to you it might not be a big deal. But what would happen if you tried that with your spouse? What if you brought a gift with an ex's name on it on your ex's birthday, but then gave it to your spouse? How do you think they would receive that offering? How do you think they would feel about it? This is where we'll see the truth of our offering. This is where we'll see our selfishness and how we're unwilling to let go of the lie. But make no mistake, it's not about chocolate bunnies. Nor is it about following the Haggadah to make sure our Seder is technically correct. When we do this, our heart still doesn't get addressed, because it becomes an exercise of checking boxes. This is hypocrisy. It's covering our sins with fig leaves because we're unwilling to wrestle with the Word in our soul. Our focus is all about looking good on the outside because it's all about us. But there'll come a time when we'll be unable to subdue our flesh, and then we'll wonder where the power of the Holy Spirit went. Many will go around just before Passover and remove all the leaven from their homes. Then they'll pat themselves on the back, thinking themselves righteous. After all, it wasn't too long ago they were observing the bunny day instead. Yes, we've checked the box, so now we can get back to arguing with our spouse and lusting over our co-workers or ignoring our neighbors. But hey, we've got that leaven out of our house, so we're all good, right? Let's take a look at Revelation 17, where Christ begins to add some color to all this. Then the angel carried me away in the Spirit, into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with the abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. Now remember, the Father often uses the physical to represent the spiritual, and here the physical is expressed with the color and jewels. The purple and scarlet clothing is a sign of royalty and wealth, while the fact that she is adorned with gold, jewels, and pearls is to emphasize that religious Babylon is strongly supported by those of wealth and status. This is not a poor, shunned, and disgraced figure. This is one who is celebrated and beloved by the world, as every one of the world's major religions will be engulfed by her. But what's interesting is in her hand is a golden cup filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries, which means she's spiritually and morally bankrupt. Often we'll read this to be our own personal behavior, but the warning is speaking in terms of something very specific, and what John was so astonished at. It's not about people behaving badly, both in and outside of marriage. It's about spiritual adultery. Let's continue into verse 5. The name written on her forehead was a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes, and the abominations of the earth. So it's made clear that Babylon is the mother of the prostitutes of all the religions of the earth, and that they're an abomination in the eyes of the Father. Then we're told, I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Do you remember the woman from Proverbs 7, who was drunk with the blood of the saints? Well, here she is, sucking the very life out of the martyrs for Christ. And when John saw her, he was astonished. Now keep in mind that John was being given these visions on the island of Patmos and was writing the revelation of Christ. In other words, John is telling what the bridegroom wants us to know. And what he's telling us is there's a woman called Babylon who is the mother of harlots, and she's coming for you. Now many will say, oh, I've made it now. I've already overcome. I made my altar call and I said my sinner's prayer, so I'm all good, right? And what about the Torah keeper, who thinks, well, they're okay because they removed all the leaven from their house, they wear their tzitzits, and they don't eat pork? John is warning us about the seduction of the woman, who's seeking to seduce us into turning the pure word of the Father into a religion by fulfilling the Father's instructions through checking boxes and creating traditions. But when we do this, we bypass a critical step, the step of wrestling with the Word in order to circumcise our heart. So John is warning us that our traditions and religions are actually working against our spiritual journey. Now, it's easy to find traditions in Judaism, but what about Christianity? Yes, they're easy to spot there too. We see Christians' observance of them throughout the year, all of which they use to proclaim Christ, but in reality, none can be found anywhere in Scripture. And we see the same thing in Messianic Hebrew roots movements as well. Ironically, many in these movements have gotten rid of the Apostle Paul, the very one who made the warning of these things clear. The one who knew better than any of us that if we're not wise, we'll eventually end up throwing the Messiah out by making him of no effect. And as we continue in Revelation, we read this very clear warning from Christ. And he said to me, "The waters which you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages, in other words, the earth. And the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the prostitute, and will make her desolate and naked. They will eat her flesh, and burn her up with fire." Now we know the prostitute is working against the Father, so why would the beast system destroy her? And Christ tells us that there's going to be something that's going to happen, something that is going to cause the beast system to destroy her. So the question is what? Fortunately, we're told what's going to happen in the very next verse. "For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled." So the Father is going to put it in their hearts to carry out his will, so that they will be of one mind, in other words, of one religion, and then they're going to hand over their power to the beast system to devour those who remain a part of her. In other words, do not be surprised, my brothers and sisters, if the world hates you, because we're coming upon a time when the beast system is no longer going to put up with the religious. And it's the Father who's going to use the beast system to kill the prostitute, because she served her purpose, and he's done with her. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm going to take this warning seriously. I'm going to heed the Father's wake-up call to come out of her and stop substituting tradition and checking boxes as a form of worship to the Father. And I hope you don't miss the irony, or just how cunning the enemy really is. He has been able to convince modern Christianity to replace the very thing that would help them remove the leaven, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, with more leaven, Easter. But he's also convinced many to simply remove the leaven from their house and not from their heart. So the time is now to let go of whatever pseudo-religious doctrine we're holding on to and grab the hem of Christ's garment. Because if we don't, in the end, it's all going away anyway, and it's going to take us with it. Whomever is found in her is going to partake in her plagues. Now there's no doubt we're in the lead up to the return of the Messiah. So maybe it's time we stop kidding ourselves and stop playing church. The Father has blessed us with a wake-up call to come out of her, and with very good reason, as the Father himself has ordered her destruction. So I say we take this warning seriously, and we ask ourselves whether we really want to be a part of something that's going to be devoured. It's time to decide whether we're going to come out of her and enter into the covenant of promise, or whether we're going to remain in the whorehouse and partake in her plagues. So to paraphrase Joshua, now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away all those hollow traditions and pagan ways you worship and become a servant of the Lord. But above all, be honest with yourself. If giving up these things is undesirable to you, then you have already chosen whom you will serve. My prayer is that everyone who hears this message chooses wisely and heeds these words of the Apostle Paul. Therefore, keep the feast, not with the old bread, leavened with malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Thank you. We hope that you found this teaching helpful, and may you be blessed in your pursuit of truth. Shalom.